Well, it's 5-Minute Friday, and today I want to talk to you a little bit about society and politics during the time of Jesus. In fact, I want to mention 4 key players that Jesus is going to encounter during his time on this earth. You see, politics during the time of Jesus was a complex mixture of divergent social, political, and religious ideologies. And there were 4 distinct movements that were alive and well during Jesus' day. And I think it's helpful to understand these 4 movements and look at how Jesus does sometimes overlap, but also is completely different than any of these other movements. The first movement is the Zealot movement. Zealots took the revolutionary option. Zealots advocated outward violence, even armed rebellion, to try to rid Israel of Roman oppression. Nothing else, they thought, would do the trick other than removing them with force. And so Zealots were looked upon either as freedom fighters, depending on what point of view you looked at them from, freedom fighters or terrorists. Especially if you were Roman, you would see them as terrorists. What's interesting to me is that we have notice of an apostle of Jesus called Simon the Zealot. And at the same time, we also have Matthew the tax collector. And so these two would have been on the extreme end of each side of the political scale, right? But yet here they are, united together under the leadership of Jesus Christ. The Zealots were one of 4 movements, but let's talk about another one. We have heard of these other 2, the next 2 I'm going to mention probably more than any of the others, but they're a part of this political landscape that Jesus enters into. Let's talk about the Sadducees. So you have the Zealots and you have the Sadducees. The Sadducees were the pragmatists of the day. They were the wealthy lay nobles. These were the priests and the aristocrats. They sought to conserve their wealth and power through compromise with Rome. So think about that. You have the Zealots who wanted to fight them. You had the Sadducees who wanted to compromise. Now, politically speaking, this was the most reliable or realistic option that the people had. Most of the members of the Sanhedrin were from this Sadducee group. In many ways, a Sadducee could be described as the least religious group in these 4 that we're going to mention today. We see this in their lack of belief in the resurrection from the dead. But please don't make the mistake of assuming that these men were agnostic or atheistic, because they certainly weren't. These men were committed to the Jewish faith, especially on the basis of the earliest books of the Bible, which we call the Torah or the Law, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. Now, they were at the top of the pecking order in Jewish society of their time. They were much more concerned with present-day affairs than they were with end-of-life or life-to-come speculations. Now, in the Gospels, it is evident that the Sadducees are the main opponents of Jesus at the time of his trial and at the time of his death. They rightly saw that Jesus' radical brand of religion was going to take away their power and was going to threaten their status. And that leads us right into another group that goes hand in hand in their opposition of Jesus, and that's the Pharisees. So we have the Zealots, we have the Sadducees, and we have the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the idealists of Jewish society. Most of the scribes, the theologians of the day, were from this group of people called Pharisees. And in general, despite their bad press in the Gospels, the Pharisees sought to live a life of spiritual purity by a meticulous following of the Torah. They did not believe in compromise with the Romans, as did the Sadducees, but they also didn't believe in revolutionary activity like the Zealots did. No, their emphasis was on the law. Now, that overemphasis resulted in a lot of legalism, which became a pretext for their hypocrisy, which Jesus is going to call out at every single turn. But the Pharisees were highly committed. They were deeply spiritual people. They, unlike the Sadducees, believed in the resurrection from the dead. And from their perspective, Jesus seems to just trivialize the law, and that explains their anger toward him. The last group we'll talk about and mention are the Essenes. This is the least known of the 4 groups that we're talking about today. And the Essenes solved the problem of Jewish identity by removing themselves from society. These are the monks, if you will. These are the hippies of the day, doing their own thing. They're not going to engage. They're going to completely withdraw from Jewish society. And John the Baptist has the appearance of has Essene-like qualities, but he's certainly not an Essene in the fullest definition of the word. I just think it's so important to understand the players that come into Jesus' life as he does his ministry in the first century of Jewish history. I'm so glad you joined us today. I'm glad you listened to the end. We're going to continue looking at the life of Christ. I can't wait for Sunday. I hope that you'll be there either in person or online, and we'll continue our study of the most influential life that ever lived, Jesus Christ, the King of Kings, the Son of God, our Savior. See you then.